Living on the outskirts of town, my ranch was my sanctuary, a peaceful, wide-open stretch of land where my cattle roamed free. I had spent years building this life, working long shifts as a police officer while managing the ranch on weekends. It wasn't always easy, but there was a special kind of peace in watching the sun rise over my pasture, my herd grazing quietly against the golden horizon. The HOA, however, didn't seem to understand the meaning of peace. I had moved here years before the Homeowners Association was established. Back then, the area was rural, quiet, and full of like-minded people who respected each other's space. But as the town grew and suburbanites poured in, the HOA arrived with them, bringing endless rules and power-hungry board members eager to control everyone's lives. My closest neighbor, a woman everyone secretly called HOA Karen, had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, constantly watching through her oversized bay window. If I so much as left a fence post crooked, I'd find a violation notice taped to my mailbox the next day. At first, I tried to be civil. I attended the HOA meetings, even though my ranch was technically outside their jurisdiction. I wasn't officially part of the HOA, but that didn't stop Karen from trying to impose her rules on me. She claimed my cattle ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic, and she wasn't shy about voicing her disapproval. It didn't matter that my property had been a working ranch long before her manicured lawn arrived. To her, I was an eyesore, a stubborn holdout refusing to bend to the HOA's will. One morning, things escalated beyond passive-aggressive notes. I was finishing my morning chores, tending to my prize heifer, Daisy. She was my favorite, gentle and sweet, with big brown eyes that could melt the toughest heart. She had just given birth a few weeks prior, and I was extra careful with her, knowing how fragile new mothers could be. That's when I heard it. A sharp, high-pitched buzzing sound. I turned just in time to see Karen standing at the edge of my property, holding a cattle prod. My stomach twisted into a knot. The electric prod buzzed again as she jabbed it against Daisy's side. The poor cow flinched, stumbling back in pain, her calf letting out a frightened bleat. I dropped the feed bucket and sprinted across the pasture. My heart pounded with rage, and every part of my training as a cop fought against my urge to lose control. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, voice cold and sharp. Karen barely blinked. She wore that smug expression she always had when she thought she was in the right. "Your cow was too close to the property line," she snapped. "HOA regulations state that animals shouldn't cross into shared spaces. I'm just enforcing the rules." I stepped between her and Daisy, my fists clenched at my sides. "You assaulted my cow with an electric prod? That's animal cruelty." Karen rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a little zap. Maybe if you kept your filthy animals away from civilized people, we wouldn't have a problem." I took a slow, steady breath to keep myself from exploding. "Touch my livestock again, and I'll make sure you face criminal charges," I warned, my voice dangerously low. "You wouldn't dare," she smirked. "I know the law. And besides, the HOA backs me. You're just a rancher living in the past." I let her words hang in the air for a moment before replying. "Actually, I'm more than just a rancher." I pulled my badge from my back pocket and held it up so she could see. "I'm an off-duty police officer, and what you just did is a felony." Her face paled. The arrogant smirk wiped clean. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen seemed to realize she'd crossed a line she couldn't smooth over with a complaint letter. You can't be serious," she stammered. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. If you think I'm joking, try me." Without another word, Karen turned on her heel and stomped back toward her pristine white house. But I wasn't about to let this go. Daisy trembled next to me, still recovering from the shock, and anger simmered low and hot in my gut. Karen thought she could mess with my ranch and walk away. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and I was just getting started. I spent the rest of the day keeping an eye on Daisy, making sure the electric prod hadn't caused any lingering harm. She seemed shaken, but otherwise fine, though her calf stuck close to her side, still frightened. My hands trembled with anger every time I thought about what Karen had done. It wasn't just the cruelty, it was the arrogance. The way she acted like she owned the entire neighborhood, even the land she had no right to touch. By nightfall, I had reviewed every legal option I had. As a police officer, I knew the law inside out. What Karen did wasn't just a minor offense. It was animal cruelty under state law. And in my jurisdiction, that came with real consequences. But I also knew Karen wasn't the type to back down just because she'd been caught. If anything, her ego would push her to retaliate. And I was right. The next morning, I found a certified letter waiting for me in the mailbox. A formal complaint from the HOA. Apparently, they claimed that my livestock was a hazard to the community and needed to be relocated. I laughed out loud when I read it. I wasn't part of their HOA, and no amount of paperwork would change that. My ranch was grandfathered in long before their bylaws ever existed. But Karen wasn't relying on just letters. By mid-afternoon, I saw her pacing along the property line with a clipboard, taking photos of my cattle. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching her with narrowed eyes. I knew what she was doing, trying to gather evidence to build a bigger case against me. She had no idea that I was already 3 steps ahead. I'd spent the night filing a formal report with animal control. I documented every detail: the electric prod, the visible burn mark on Daisy's side, and even the security footage from the camera I had mounted near the barn. Karen might think she was above the law, but I was about to give her a hard lesson in reality. But I didn't want to stop at just legal consequences. I wanted to make a point, one she would never forget. So I made a call. A week later, a construction crew arrived at my property. Karen stood at her window, watching with suspicion as they unloaded fencing materials. I didn't hide what I was doing. I wanted her to see. Let her wonder. Let her sweat. By sunset, the crew had finished installing a sleek, custom-built fence along the property line. But this wasn't just any fence. It was the entrance to a private, luxury dog park. And the best part? It was open to the entire neighborhood, except Karen. I posted a massive wooden sign at the gate. "Welcome to Daisy's Retreat, members-only dog park, sponsored by the rancher next door." I knew exactly how much Karen hated dogs. She had once tried to fine another neighbor because their golden retriever barked too loudly during the day. Now, she was going to live next to the busiest, happiest dog park in the entire community. And I wasn't done yet. The next day, I sent out a letter to every resident, excluding Karen, offering a free 1-year membership. I described it as a community service, a gift to thank my neighbors for their kindness. In reality, it was a calculated move. I wanted every dog owner within a 5-mile radius to bring their pets right to Karen's doorstep. By the following weekend, the park was buzzing with activity. Dogs of all sizes ran through the agility course, splashing in the custom doggy pool and chasing tennis balls across the open field. I even installed a sound system that played soft country music during the day, just loud enough for Karen to hear from her living room. She couldn't do a thing about it. Legally, the land was mine, and I had all the proper permits. Her precious HOA had no authority over me, and I had the law on my side. And while she sat fuming inside her house, I welcomed every happy dog owner with a smile, making sure to wave every time Karen peeked through her curtains. And just to twist the knife a little more, I gave every dog that visited a free electric prod-shaped chew toy. By the end of the month, Karen had filed no fewer than 15 noise complaints against me. Each one was promptly dismissed. The best part? The very animal control office she tried to use against me was now investigating her for animal cruelty. Karen thought she could push me around. She had no idea who she was dealing with. And I wasn't finished yet. The dog park became a neighborhood sensation almost overnight. Families who had barely spoken to one another were now bonding over playdates for their dogs. Every evening, people gathered at Daisy's retreat to relax while their dogs ran free. I added a few more amenities to keep the place buzzing: a shaded picnic area, a doggy splash zone, and even a monthly pause and play event with free treats and toys. Karen, of course, was losing her mind. I spotted her more than once standing at her window, arms folded tight across her chest, watching the dogs bark and play. She called the HOA board meeting to try and shut me down, but I already knew how that would go. My property wasn't under their jurisdiction, and I had every legal permit in place. Her frustration only grew when her complaints to local authorities fell flat. After all, the only disturbance was happy dogs having the time of their lives. And I made sure Karen couldn't ignore it. One morning, I hired a local artist to paint a massive mural on the side of my barn, facing directly toward her house. It showed a cartoon version of Daisy, smiling with sunglasses, standing under the words, "Daisy's Revenge. Everyone's welcome, except HOA Karen." By the time the mural was finished, Karen had come storming across the property line 3 separate times, threatening legal action. Each time, I calmly reminded her she was trespassing. I even gave her a printed copy of my property deed the last time she showed up, just to shut her up. I thought she might finally back down. I was wrong. A week later, I came home from a late shift to find my mailbox stuffed with legal notices. Karen wasn't just filing complaints, she had hired a lawyer to try and argue that my dog park was a public nuisance. The boldness of it almost made me laugh. But the real kicker? She'd also filed a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing her by running the dog park. She must have thought I'd panic. Instead, I called my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sylvia, who loved nothing more than crushing petty legal threats. When I explained the situation, she laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "She's suing you because your dog park is too fun?" she asked between chuckles. "Pretty much," I said. "Think she's got a case?" "Not a chance," Sylvia said. "In fact, I think it's time to push back." Sylvia didn't just respond to Karen's legal threats. She filed a countersuit for defamation and harassment. We documented every false report, every time she trespassed, and even gathered testimonies from my dog park visitors about how Karen had harassed them for using the park. I also made sure to submit my most important evidence, the security footage of her shocking Daisy with the electric prod. Within 2 weeks, a judge not only threw out her claims, but also ordered her to cover my legal fees. But I wasn't finished. With the legal drama settled, I decided it was time to take things to the next level. I started reaching out to local animal rescues and shelters, offering the dog park as a space for adoption events. Soon, we were hosting monthly Adopt-a-Pup days, where families could come to play with and adopt dogs in need of a home. Karen couldn't stand it. Her once quiet home now faced a weekly parade of wagging tails and excited families. And every time I saw her peeking through her curtains, I gave her my biggest, friendliest wave. But the final blow came when a local news station caught wind of the story. They reached out to do a segment on Daisy's retreat, painting it as a heartwarming community effort. I happily gave them a tour, making sure to mention how the park was inspired by my beloved cow, and subtly hinted at the incident with the electric prod. When the story aired, Karen's face went pale. She had spent years building her reputation as the perfect HOA president, strict, polished, and always in control. Now, she was the villain in a local news story, and everyone in town knew exactly what kind of person she was. The day after the segment aired, Karen vanished from the HOA board. Rumors swirled that she had been forced to step down due to the bad press. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt peaceful. And as for Daisy, she made a full recovery. She still loved her morning walks along the fence line, where she'd stop to watch the dogs play. I like to think she knew, in her own way, that the park was her victory too. Karen learned a hard lesson. Messing with my animals was a mistake she wouldn't soon forget. And the best part? I wasn't done making her life a living nightmare. With Karen off the HOA board, you'd think the drama would have ended. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that people like her don't go down quietly. Even after stepping down, she still tried to stir up trouble. Passive-aggressive letters, anonymous complaints to the county about noise levels, and, my personal favorite, calling animal control on Daisy. Of course, when the officer arrived, Daisy was lounging peacefully in the sun, not a single sign of mistreatment. The officer even gave her a pat on the head and laughed when I explained the history with Karen. Still, I knew Karen wasn't done poking the hornet's nest. So, I decided it was time to poke back. I started expanding Daisy's retreat. If Karen thought a small dog park was annoying, she was about to learn what real irritation felt like. First, I put up a brand new, brightly colored sign right at the edge of my property, directly visible from Karen's front porch. It read, "Daisy's Retreat, now open for parties." That's right. I turned the park into a rentable event space. Birthday parties, adoption celebrations, and even a doggy costume contest. Word spread fast, and soon my weekends were fully booked. The sight of families laughing and dogs chasing each other was sweet. But the best part? Watching Karen's car back out of her driveway in frustration every time an event kicked off, and I wasn't finished. Next, I collaborated with a local coffee truck to set up a permanent weekend spot at the park. Every Saturday morning, the scent of fresh brewed coffee and pastries filled the air, drifting straight toward Karen's house. It became a hit with the whole neighborhood. Families who had once stayed quiet to avoid HOA drama were suddenly out in full force, sipping lattes while their dogs played. But the pièce de résistance? The Daisy's Retreat Community Fair. I pulled out all the stops. I invited local businesses to set up booths, hired a live band, and even got a local TV station to sponsor a dog show. Hundreds of people showed up, filling the field with laughter, music, and the occasional bark of joy. Karen? She spent the entire day twitching her curtains. Of course, I made sure to take a special delivery to her doorstep that evening, a VIP invitation to the next event, featuring Daisy's smiling face on the front. Petty? Maybe. But after what she put us through, it felt earned. But even with all the fun, I hadn't forgotten the real reason I started this. Daisy. She was still my top priority, and I wanted to ensure she lived the best life possible. So, with the extra revenue from park rentals, I upgraded her barn to a state-of-the-art shelter with heated stalls and an open pasture. She deserved nothing less after everything she'd endured. And just when I thought things couldn't get any better, fate handed me the ultimate victory. A letter arrived in my mailbox, an official notice from the HOA. But this time, it wasn't a fine, it was an apology. Apparently, the new HOA president had taken over and wanted to mend fences. He admitted that the previous board, under Karen's leadership, had acted inappropriately and that my dog park had brought the community closer together. To make amends, they offered to reimburse the legal fees Karen had cost me, along with a generous donation to the animal rescue I partnered with. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the letter. Karen had lost. And not only had she lost, but her precious HOA had also flipped sides. I framed that apology letter and hung it in Daisy's barn, right next to the mural of her in sunglasses. Every time I see it, I remember, you don't mess with my animals. And if you do, I'll make sure you never forget it. With the HOA officially backing down and the new president embracing Daisy's retreat, I finally felt like I could breathe again. But if I thought Karen would simply fade away, I was wrong. She wasn't done, at least not yet. A few weeks after the HOA's apology, I noticed something odd. One of my regulars, a sweet older woman named Mrs. Thompson, mentioned seeing Karen talking to a city inspector near the park. My gut told me she was up to no good. And sure enough, a few days later, I received a notice from the city about a zoning violation. Apparently, according to some obscure municipal code, my property wasn't technically zoned for commercial recreational activity. Never mind the fact that it was private land, and I wasn't charging anyone to visit unless they rented the event space. This wasn't just a random inspection. This had Karen's fingerprints all over it. But here's the thing about being pushed one too many times. You start to push back even harder. I spent the next 2 weeks digging through county records, researching property laws, and working with a local lawyer who was a big fan of Daisy. What I found made me grin like a Cheshire cat. Karen had made a mistake, a big one. Apparently, when the HOA expanded their community years ago, the original developers had signed a land use agreement granting permanent agricultural rights to my property. This meant I had the legal right to use my land for any agricultural purpose, including animal rescue and outdoor community events. In other words, Daisy's retreat was untouchable. Armed with this information, I filed a counterclaim, not only shutting down the city's violation, but also forcing the HOA to officially recognize the park as a community benefit zone. This gave me permanent permission to operate and meant the HOA could never interfere with my land again. And the best part? Since Karen was the one who triggered the investigation, the HOA board unanimously voted to charge her for all the legal fees involved, over $8,000. When the notice landed in her mailbox, she went ballistic. I heard from Mrs. Thompson that Karen tried to fight it at the next HOA meeting, but with her reputation in shambles and the entire neighborhood rallying behind Daisy's retreat, she didn't stand a chance. A week later, a moving truck showed up in front of her house. Karen was leaving. The woman who had tormented me, burned my cow, and tried to ruin my life was packing up and getting out for good. But I wasn't quite done. The weekend after she left, I hosted the biggest event Daisy's retreat had ever seen, a Goodbye Karen charity fundraiser. Neighbors came out in droves, laughing and toasting to the end of an era. We raised over $15,000 for local animal rescues. And Daisy, She got to enjoy a custom cake made of apples, oats, and molasses. I even commissioned a special plaque to commemorate the victory. Right by the entrance to Daisy's retreat, it reads, "In honor of Daisy, proof that no bully can win." It's funny how life works. What started as a cruel attempt to hurt my beloved cow had turned into something bigger than I ever imagined. Not only did I protect Daisy, but I also gave my community a place to come together, something even the HOA couldn't tear down. And as for Karen, I heard she moved to a condo downtown, far away from cows, dog parks, and people who wouldn't put up with her nonsense. Good riddance. As the sun set that night, I stood by the fence watching Daisy graze peacefully. I reached over and scratched behind her ears, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. We had won, not just the battle, but the war. And no one would ever mess with my animals again. Life felt different after Karen's departure. Quieter, easier, and undeniably sweeter. With her gone, the HOA had no one left to stir up trouble. The new president, Mrs. Jenkins, was the complete opposite of Karen. She loved what I had done with Daisy's retreat and even suggested expanding the space to host more community events. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I could walk outside without worrying about surprise inspections or ridiculous fines. Daisy seemed happier too. She had more visitors than ever, and she'd become a local celebrity. Kids from the neighborhood loved brushing her coat and feeding her carrots. Some even called her the Queen of the Meadow. But the best part? I wasn't just running a dog park anymore. It had become a place where people came together, where new friendships formed and old grudges faded. What once was an empty, trashed lot was now the heart of our community. Of course, I hadn't forgotten what Karen did. I still remembered the sight of Daisy trembling after that electric prod incident, the burn on her side, a cruel reminder of Karen's hatred. But instead of holding on to that anger, I let my actions speak louder. A few months later, I received an official letter from the city. Thanks to the petition I started, one that the entire neighborhood had signed, the city council approved the rezoning of my land. Daisy's retreat was now permanently protected as a community animal sanctuary. No more legal loopholes, no more HOA interference. Ever. To celebrate, I planned the biggest event yet, the Daisy Jubilee. It was a day-long festival featuring live music, food trucks, and, of course, animal-themed games. Neighbors donated prizes, local businesses sponsored booths, and all the proceeds went to animal welfare organizations. The turnout blew me away. Families filled the field, laughing and playing while dogs chased each other across the open grass. Daisy was the star of the show, wearing a flower crown and posing for pictures in front of a handmade photo booth that read, "From bullied to beloved, welcome to Daisy's retreat." By the end of the day, we raised over $30,000, enough to fund several animal rescues across the county. The mayor even showed up and gave a speech, commending the community for turning a negative situation into a positive force for change. And Karen? She never showed her face. Word had spread that she moved across town into a small, HOA-free apartment complex. I heard through the grapevine that she tried causing trouble there too, but without the power of an HOA behind her, no one paid attention. A few weeks after the festival, I got a package in the mail. At first, I thought it was another legal notice, but when I opened it, I found a handwritten letter. It was from Mrs. Jenkins, the new HOA president. "I just wanted to thank you for standing your ground. This community is better because of you and Daisy. Enclosed is a small gift of gratitude from all of us." Inside the envelope was a gift card for a local farm supply store and a second, smaller envelope. I opened it and laughed out loud. It was Karen's final HOA fine, a $250 penalty for improper use of electric devices. Mrs. Jenkins had framed it and written a note underneath. For Daisy, justice served. I hung the frame right by the barn door. Every time I see it, I smile. Looking back, I never imagined that one cruel act could lead to something so powerful. Karen had tried to break us, but instead, she brought the community together. My land wasn't just a place for Daisy anymore. It was a sanctuary for everyone who needed a little peace. And as long as I'm here, no one will ever hurt my animals again. Daisy gave a soft moo as the sun dipped behind the hills. I scratched behind her ears, feeling the warmth of her fur beneath my fingers. "We did it, girl," I whispered. "We won." And with that, we walked back toward the barn, knowing that no matter what came next, Daisy's retreat would always stand as a reminder. When you fight for what's right, no bully can win.